primarily apartments. Now, talking duplex packages and things like that, we'd be happy to take a look. But that's really our bread and butter, and so we love all of your referrals and things like that, but also we can't help your cousin with his barbershop, which is really not our expertise. And so we appreciate any of the referrals. We're happy to link you up with some awesome commercial agents, Jeremy in the real estate here at the Market Center. But we do multifamily. Greg, you want to flip us to the next one? I'll show everybody the map.
Okay, here's what all we're gonna do.
So, as Greg was hinting at, we work all over Texas. And so this map is found on our website. Lisa put it together, gogettersmultifamily.com. And really any of the pins you see here are markets that we're currently active in, prospecting in, or sold business in. And so you're gonna be able to click on any of those pins and have access to market demographics, historical occupancy, rent figures, whatever you can need to start your analysis, start your underwriting, and learn a little bit more about a market. If there's one on here that you're interested in that's not does not have a pin, we'd be happy to research that and get back with you. But today we're going to talk about mostly Lubbock and really the apartment market as a whole. So within that map, this is sort of broken down by the properties that we're measuring. And so at any given time, we're measuring between 4,000 and 5,000 properties across 640,000 units in the state of Texas. And so there's some markets like San Antonio, obviously they're much larger, a couple 100,000 units, and you have markets like Lubbock that are closer to 35,000 units. But all of the units that we measure is what helps put the data together for this presentation, and helps Lisa come up with our market book every year that really quantifies all this. So just a little highlight.
Okay, so just to be clear, like in Abilene, there's 105 multifamily markets?
105 multifamily properties.
Or that's just what y'all knew about?
There's 105 multifamily properties.
No, I'm like, this is for real. Like, y'all research all of them. Even these are not just ones that y'all know about. It's like y'all are researching all the time.
If we're working in a market, it's because we're comfortable and confident working in the market. And so there's 105 multifamily properties. Now, this is not going to encompass all of the duplexes or fourplexes and things like that. But general, what you consider multifamily apartments, that's
Okay.
All right, so next up, we're gonna cover jobs. We're gonna cover some of these market fundamentals on what rents and occupancies are doing. And we've also got a couple of cool slides on what it costs somebody to rent versus what it costs to own. A lot of talk about the affordability of properties, so we'll go over that in detail and kind of boil it down just to Lubbock too.
Yeah, so this is just a 15-year average growth rate for, again, all the markets we serve across Texas compared to Texas and the United States as a whole. Just overview, Texas has really outperformed the United States more than double. Lubbock slightly behind that, but Lubbock really consistently is keeping up with the majority of these properties, and that's even with San Antonio included, which is really considered a primary market. So I really think it's a good sign for Lubbock just over the last 15 years. Ryan will go a little more about the Lubbock actual stats.
Yeah, this is just Lubbock specific. We all work here in Lubbock. This is good to talk about with people you talk to. But I know it's been a topic in past meetings about how stable and consistent Lubbock is compared to some other markets. We may not have the high highs, but also not the low lows. So 1.5 on the last level, 1.6% average job growth over the past 10 years or so. Obviously, COVID globally was not a great year for a lot of people. But not a great year. But overall, Lubbock's had a lot of growth. And if you haven't been paying attention at all, you probably haven't heard of the prenup, but they finally had the ribbon cutting on January 14th, I believe. So that's a ton of new jobs in Lubbock. Texas Tech, obviously, a lot of investment in their programs. We're still a cotton producer in the world. BASF Agricultural Solutions, they have a couple new teams and whatnot. So just talking points if you're talking to investors in Lubbock and why to invest here. So next slide. This is a snapshot back to that website that Lisa does a fantastic job of putting together. This is just a little bit to, and you can find this, go to multifamily.com. This is just one snapshot, but it has average occupancy, the change in occupancy year over year. Same thing with rent growth and what the average rents are for a lot of different markets that we cover. Go back to that map that Grant had. If you're looking at a specific market, a lot of information can be found on that website.
Yeah, so here's another chart going all the way back to 2015. This is just the average rent occupancy for Lubbock. Really, probably the biggest thing to highlight is we've seen about 3.7% rent growth year over year since 2015. That is really good. Why is this information important? Well, we have to know this stuff when we're underwriting properties. just put the valuation together for property owners, so we have to know, okay, what's the projected rate growth for next year or even the previous years if we're gonna underwrite a deal to its future. So we've had seen a slight dip in occupancy. We're back down in really 2017, 2018 levels. We do expect that to pick back up. But granted, what does this look like versus the cost of mortgage? We'll kind of go into that a little more.
Yeah, it's not good.
Okay, hold on. Don't let questions at the end.
No, question now.
Is that okay? Can you go back one slide? Oh my gosh, this is so good. Okay, so just to make for sure that I'm like looking at this right, this is what's the average occupancy, right? Of like every multifamily property that y'all look at, on average, how much of them are rented out, right? So currently 87.9% of all of those properties are rented out.
Well,
Every single unit.
yeah, so it's, based on the units. So
Okay.
if you have a 100-unit property right now, it's probably somewhere around 88 out of 100 units are rented.
Okay, you guys that are investors, how many of you feel this? That it is the lowest occupancy that you've had probably since 2019?
Okay.
I would say I feel it. Anyways, I think that's interesting to look at. Okay, the other thing I wanted to go to is average rent rate. So this is the average rent per unit. Okay, whenever y'all are evaluating that, I'm just like curious. An investor looking to rent out something, are they trying to stay around to the average rent?
Well,
Is that kind of like a,
if you have a specific property in mind, we're gonna boil it down to the square footage and the neighborhood and the unit type and what's the layout, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 1-bedroom. This is encompassing all of Lubbock as a whole, just to measure consistent rent growth in like a controlled market for the last 10 years. But there's gonna be a lot lower, a lot higher, kind of like, when you talk about median home price, sold, there's a lot higher and a lot lower. As we see it, the highs get higher, typically the lows aren't getting lower. And so boosts your average.
These are all this data, a lot of this from ALN apartment data, and they do, market surveys, they keep up with what's going on in the markets, and, they keep up with 50+ units. So this is 50+ units since 2015.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How does the apartment market compare to like the fiveplex market and above? Individual, the bigger, smaller units versus apartments?
I think it's very similar because their tenants have the choice of either rent a home or buying, and everybody's in a similar boat. You talk to people who have single family rentals, you said earlier, occupancy is lower than what it was a couple years ago.
A lot of it, we'll touch on it later in the presentation, is the amount of new supply that's come online over the last couple of years. And the last time that happened, you can see, you just follow the trend line, and we'll talk about some of the new construction, but back in 2017, 2018, it's a similar story. And then it has, rates get higher and the supply softens and the demand goes up and the supply goes down. And in turn, the occupancy changes. But if, those are all great questions. So what this slide is talking about, why it's important to you and everybody in this room, is what is the average gap between the average cost of rent today versus the average cost to own. And we're gonna dig into this in a little bit more depth. But in Lubbock, not including taxes and insurance, right now for 2024, it is almost $500 more affordable to rent today than it is to buy a home. And so that is not a good thing or a bad thing, but what it shows you is if you're not an investor or you don't represent investors, you really should be. And so, we've covered a lot of different markets, but Greg, you maybe want to press the next slide. I think this is going to have a lot of beneficial information for you. So we decided to dig into it a little bit further because we figure that if you're renting an apartment today, you're probably going to participate. If your next step up is buying a house in a first-time home buyer program, Home 100, or FHA loan. And so you're probably not, putting down 20%. You're probably putting down 3.5%, 5%, 10%, somewhere along those lines. And the previous example that sort of measures Lubbock as a whole, it doesn't include tax and insurance, which you have to pay those. Unfortunately, you have to pay them. So we did a little bit of math for you to keep it easy. So the median home price per Tara's numbers, so it's her fault if it's wrong. But per Tara's numbers for 2024 was $235,000 in Lubbock. If you bought an FHA loan at 3.5%, we use an alliance rate, this is a couple weeks old, but we use an alliance rate of 6.125. Average tax and insurance at that price came up with a total monthly payment today of between $1,800 and $1,900. The average rent we just talked about was $1,123. So there's a gap right now closer to $700 to $800. It's $700 to $800 more affordable to rent on average in Lubbock today than it is to buy a home. And so if we go back a few years ago, if you were in the business in 2021, everybody's like, selling houses, things are great, driving Rolls Royces. It was awesome. So in 2021, the same numbers, median home price, $215,000, same loan, 2.5% interest rate. I've still got one of those. I don't know if anybody else does, but they're awesome. And 2.5% interest rate, taxes, insurance. The average payment was closer to over $1,300 a month. So that was the obligation for a homeowner at that time. If you're ever to buy a house within an FHA loan, multiple offer situation. But anyways, the average rent at that time was closer to just over $1,000. So it was only $200 or $300 on average across all of Lubbock, more affordable to rent at that time. So it was a lot more feasible for folks to buy houses, and investments started to think about how much more sense does this make versus just go ahead and buy a primary residence. So we should share all this as not like this is good or this is bad or this is the direction we're going. But if you're not, if your clients are concerned about investing in real estate right now, this is an excellent time, to buy an piece of investment in real estate because the tenant retention is expected to rise, occupancy is expected to pick up because the other option of buying a house is just simply so much less affordable. And so, that's what's keeping the tenants in their seats, and it's really important when we're looking at, feasibility of long-term investments.
All right, so next up, we're going to talk about the operations, and for investment property, this is what really drives values. So a quick show of hands, how many of you have had property insurance and taxes go up over the last couple of years? Okay, so in addition to these two things, on the commercial side, you have rates going up, and like on a home, you can usually lock in a 30-year mortgage, right, and have the same rate for all 30 years. Commercial's a lot different because most of the loans are 5-year terms, 10-year terms. So everybody that's buying in 2020, if they had a 5-year term, well, 2025, they're either refinancing or selling. So imagine like property taxes up, insurance up, now your rate's gone from 4.5% to 8.5%. So that's what's happening in the commercial world right now. So either out of necessity, just to offset these higher costs, you get an extra rent bumps, or just to be more profitable. We're going to talk about some things that owners are doing to add value to their properties.
Yes, it's just a kind of introductory slide for the next couple slides we're going to talk about. So Greg was talking about values and why it's important, your expenses. So commercial multifamily is valued like a business. It's off of the income that it produces because it's an income producing asset. We also do look at sales comps, but a lot of it's going to be off of this net operating income. So that's with your income, most in the form of rents, plus all your operating expenses. So taxes, insurance, repairs and maintenance, management fees, anything else like that. That gives you your net operating income. And that is used to determine not only the value of your property, but also, commercial, it's not just about, when you're talking about getting a loan. It's not just about the borrower's creditworthiness, it's also about the property as well. So it's going to determine how much loan proceeds you can get. These people have loans coming due or whatnot. If their NOI is lower this year than it was 5 years ago, maybe they can't even cash out their high leverage loan that was originated a couple of years ago or 3 years ago or so. But anyways, go to the next slide. So something that we do, similar to what you guys do when you're talking to people making decisions on their property, listing, selling, or whatnot, you put together a CMA, let them know what you think it would sell for. We do the same thing. We call them BOVs, brokers' opinion of value. But when we do this, people will typically look at sales comps, of course, but we'll also look at their net operating income. So they'll send us their income statements for the operations of the property, their rent rolls as well, what units are occupied for, and we'll use that to determine, what's realistic on the value range, right? And so sometimes properties are overperforming, sometimes they're underperforming. And one way to determine that is through our in-house income and expense survey that we get, as well as some third-party resources as well. What our in-house income and expense survey is, for example, this past year in 2024, we underwrote like $467 million worth of volume of multifamily real estate. Average size was like $5 million, so a lot of different properties. But with that, with all those income statements we go through, our interns are always downloading some, it gets us a good average of, for example, Lubbock, Texas, per unit or on a percentage basis, how much are properties built post-2000 paying for repairs and maintenance? Or whatever it may be. So you can identify ways that they're either overperforming or underperforming, and ways to add value, and selling points, put together a good pro forma, which would be like what's your realistic year one net operating income for a new investor to provide. So this is a little bit about our in-house income survey. The next slide, this is one of the third-party sources we use, which is Yardi Matrix. Has a few of the markets we cover here, but that's just a little bit about that. The next slide, going back to why does that matter? We talked about loan proceeds, sales price affects your value. This is just a quick example of how it actually does affect the value. So in this example, we're going to use 7% cap rate. There's no significance in that. And that's kind of the point. We as investors, owners, operators, we don't really have any influence over what the market cap rate is going to be or what it's not going to be. Just like you guys don't have effect over what the mortgage rate is going to be. We can't control that. What we can control though as operators is what is this net operating income going to be? Will we be more efficient in operating our property? Can we collect more income? So if you have $50,000 at 7% cap rate, that's roughly $715,000 worth of capitalized value of your property. If you go on, 100,000 would be 1.43 million. So you can see that for every $50,000 positive or negative direction, affects the property value by roughly $715,000 worth of value and capitalized value, I guess. So they're going to talk about different examples on how someone could affect that net operating income though.
Yeah, hey, we'll boil it down even further. So, $50,000 is kind of a great benchmark for some of these apartment complexes, but for every $1 at a 7% market cap rate, that should affect your property value by $14. And so when you're thinking about if you got a fourplex here in town, and if you could save for each unit that you have $50 a month, just for each unit, I mean that's start having to pay a water bill or part of it. If you could save $50, that's $200 a month, $2,400 a year. That's $35 grand that you added in value to the property. And so, on a few $100,000, that makes a huge difference. And so for every $1 change, positive or negative income or expense, that affects the overall capitalized value of your property significantly. And so, why is that important? Has anybody in here ever seen an advertisement? I'm not saying it's you, but seen an advertisement on the MLS that says great investment opportunity, all caps. No, nobody in here? Well, I've seen a lot. And, so I've seen a lot of them, and none of them are. None of them. They're all lying. None of them are good. So, anyway, digging into that a little bit, none of them are good. Just put it down. They're not good. But maybe some of them are. So let's talk about it. So like what Ryan was talking about, the math of finding your net operating income. If you're valuing a business, you want to know what the net is. If it's making $10 million a year, that's fantastic if it's making you $10 million a year. But if it's making you $0, what a waste of time. And so let's just take an average apartment complex, 100 units, use an easy math, average rent's $1,000 across the entire complex. You should bring in $100,000 a month if everybody on the first day of the month drops off their cash, sends you underway. But that's not going to happen because you have expenses. And so, in Lubbock, and Ryan touched on this a little bit, the average expense ratio, meaning out of your gross potential rent, how much are you spending on expenses? That includes property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, management, all things, is about 55%. So you should walk away with somewhere between 40 and 45% before you pay your mortgage, before you pay your note, after you pay your expenses. So at that same apartment complex, all that math considered, you're really probably bringing in closer to $45,000 a month, $500,000 a year. Say the market cap rate in this imaginary market is 7%, then it's a $7.7 million property back in the afternoon. Well, that's in a perfect world where everybody on the first of the month is paying their rent on time, no questions asked, you have no down units, no pipes burst, nothing, nobody dog got cancer or anything. So anyways, we go down to probably something a little bit more realistic, say 85%. And that's not talking about physical occupancy. There could be 100 people living here, but only 85 of them are paying rent. And so you get to this 85% occupancy, economic occupancy, the same valuation values your property at $6.5 million. So you've lost over $1 million in value because of things that it's not as easy as sometimes just people not paying rent. Like that's not the only reason. It's you got a unit that someone moved out of. Greg was talking about make ready a while ago that he did. This lady had like 20 cats for years in there. That's not a quick turn. You gotta fumigate that place. So anyway, cats, floors, there's a pipe burst, so you close off that unit, you're using it for storage, we see that a lot. But bottom line is you're losing money off of your potential at a very high rate And like we talked about, every dollar in this world at 7% affects the property by 14. So if you have a $1,000 a month unit that you're not renting or could be renting because you're using it as storage or it's just sitting vacant on the market, it's likely beneficial to you to run a cost benefit analysis of, hey, should I drop the rent by $50 to get it filled? Because the longer it sits at this value and not getting rented is affecting my property by tens of thousands of dollars. And so, Greg, maybe you want to highlight some of the expenses, because that's the income side. That's how the income affects the value, but the expenses are a huge piece of this.
Yeah, so we've all heard about Elon Musk and Doge over the last couple months at least, right? So now there's a new deal called DOPE, so Department of Property Efficiency. And if Elon Musk was running DOPE, these are a few things that he would do. First of all, RUBS is just an acronym. It stands for Resident Utility Building Service. And on single-family properties, duplexes, everything is separately metered, right? You got your own water bill, electric bill. Well, apartments most of them are master metered by the building or by the property. So you have one water bill the owner pays, and they divvy up the expenses to the tenant. That's what RUBS is recouping utility costs. And if you're collecting, it's the same thing as rent. It's just as important. A dollar's a dollar, so collect all the RUBS. Second thing, reducing utility expenses. So if you have an older property, say built before the 90s or 2000s, you're probably wasting a lot of water. And we've done a couple of projects and just swapping out all the toilets, shower heads, you could say almost 50% of your water bill. So next thing, landscaping. It's not as common in Lubbock, but if you go to El Paso or some of these more arid climates, you'll see a lot of properties with xeriscaping or rocks instead of grass. And not only you cut your landscaping costs, but you also cut your water bill. So these are some things that you can do. The last thing is probably the most important one is tenant retention. So if you have property, you should go and add up your vacancy loss for the year, your vacant utilities, make ready costs, and add it all up and see how much it costs you per turn. And you'll see quickly how important it is to keep tenants, whether it's they're staying for 1 year now, if you can get them to stay an extra year, it makes a huge difference in your bottom line. So not only are you increasing your monthly cash flow, you're also, when you talk about putting a cap rate on these savings, it adds a ton of value to your properties. Jackson can show you some stuff of how it looks on the financials.
Yeah, so just taking everything that they presented and put it into one sheet, it looks something like that. This is consolidated, just basic income expense statement. But you can see here, even at a $58,000 change in NOI, you're roughly affecting the value of $835,000 at a 7 cap. Again, the biggest thing we're seeing, they touched on a little bit, is the economic vacancy section. So it's the difference between your gross potential rents and what you're actually collecting. So yeah, your property may be 95% full, but you may only be collecting 70% of that. So really, it's our job as advisors to really put on our advisor hat and walk through a bunch of owners and operators and show them, okay, let's do an autopsy of your income and expense statement. Say, okay, if you can change this, or maybe increase your income here, or reduce your expenses here, it's all really about being more efficient. So really, this is just a quick way to look at, how every line item makes a difference. Even just $5 change makes a difference.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about sales in 2024. It kind of broke down into really two separate type of markets. One, you have your distressed market where you have loans come and due. So you have owners that pretty much have to sell. And for the first time ever, last year, every one of us on the team worked with a lender as either REO property or a borrower that was in trouble and had to sell it before their loan came due. On the total flip side of it is loan assumptions. So you also have a lot of people who took out loans in 20 and 21 on 10-year terms. And those deals are just as attractive now as they were then because the cost of the debt hadn't changed. And you still have maybe 8 years left on the property. So that's something that's a little bit more common on apartments is people assuming loans. And for those owners, they're still achieving high sales prices for the properties.
All right, now for the fun stuff. We'll get all past all the operations. So what's going on in the multifamily market? One thing to highlight is there is no MLS for multifamily. It's not like residential. We have to go track every single source, every single property that hits the market. There could be up to 40 multiple listing services we have to track on a weekly basis. We have analysts that do a great job of keeping track of information. This is all proprietary internal information, so you will not find this information anywhere else. This is within our team. Again, all markets we've tracked over the last year, there was 564 properties that we tracked, over 17,000 units. Probably the two biggest things to really highlight here is average days on market. It's taking roughly 6.5 to 7 months on average, for most of these properties to transact. Again, that's throughout the whole state of Texas. The other thing is expired versus actually sold. We had 190 expired versus 118 sold. This shows the average, asking cap rate versus sold cap rate, average price per unit versus sold price per unit. Again, we can filter this out through each specific market, but Ryan's gonna go over what Lubbock looks like.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff on this chart. Just basically, a lot of this comes from that previous tracker, or I guess private MLS, you can call it or whatever. A lot of that data is used to construct these charts. So what does it look like for Lubbock? Where are we at now versus where were we at in peak? What's the difference? So the top, if you look at the top, that's going back 10 years or so, back to 2015. The peak of the market was 2021. There was 37 commercial apartment transactions in Lubbock, Texas, which was a record year. Put it in perspective, really. If you look before that, 2019 going back, there was never more than 15 transactions. So it was unheard of. If you fast forward to where we are now, this past year, 2024, it was only 10 transactions. So actually even lower, we don't. Anyway, so and a lot of that comes to reasons as to properties aren't performing, values are down. If you look at the bottom right, there's a couple things on this chart. There's this red line, which represents the average sold cap rate, and then there's the black bars, which represents the average price per square foot, sold price per square foot. So the red line, average sold cap rate, it's been declining over the past years. This past year was 3.7%. You may ask yourself that, why would someone buy a 3.7 cap? That's a horrible deal. Which is a great question, but that goes back to what Greg was hitting on. A lot of these properties are underperforming. Their NOIs are lower. They're in tough situations, and they're having to sell. So that's going to lower NOI. Your cap rate's going to be lower when you sell. But people don't just look at cap rates when they're buying. So you're buying for cash flow, or you're buying for the basis of the property. They may be looking at these black bars and seeing the height of the market. Average sold price per square foot was $102 per foot. Versus this past year, man, I can get a $28 per square foot discount, buy it for $74 a foot. I'm gonna get a good basis going in, and then I'll hope the market recovers. I can be able to sell it down the road for a little higher value. So there's different metrics people are looking at. Hoping the transactions will pick up this next year. We're all in the transaction business. We love transactions. So anyways, that's a little bit about Lubbock.
All right, so now we're gonna go over some new construction projects and also talk a little bit about build-to-rent communities that you may have seen. So a few weeks ago, Lubbock Land Company did a presentation, and I really want to put out this chart. It's really interesting because it shows, from a historical perspective, what's gone on new construction-wise, and also how that affects occupancy. So a lot of info on this chart, but to boil it down, average occupancy since 2009 is right over 91%. And on average, developers will pull about 700 permits a year, and about 90% of those actually get built. So you can see on, how the occupancy changes when a lot of things get built. And then as occupancies pick up, it'll cause developers to want to build more. So they'll start, build more units, and over time, just the supply and demand will cause these occupancies to fluctuate. So this is Lubbock. Grant's going to talk about some projects here in town right now.
Yeah, and Greg brings up a great point too. So these developments, sometimes they take 2 to 3 years, and even during 2020, peak of cheap debt, 2021, there was a lot of delays. I don't know if everybody remembers, they talking like the canals and all this, and supply chain issues. That was really prevalent for development. We're feeling the effects of that today for apartment developers when you talk about occupancy issues, because these developments that started in say 2022, if they got finished in 2024 and starting to lease up, we have 1,000 units come online over the last 12 months that wasn't already there, and they're offering concessions and moving specials, and they have to be competitive in order to get leased. And so that ultimately affects and puts pressure on occupancy in Lubbock. And so as those units start to fill and as there's less new starts today, then there's gonna be an opportunity for occupancy to rise. But with that, we got some awesome new properties. This is not all of them. This is just kind of a highlight reel. When we do this presentation for the apartment association, trying to highlight a few, especially that are in the room. Four corners of Lubbock, we'll call it. So there's some awesome ones in South Lubbock, 114th University. This is the Tigers Project, Falcons Nest, really beautiful property, 257 units. Right over here on the west side, there is this La Ventana property, 188 units, sick pool. We've got a student housing property north of the Loop. It's called the Wyatt. They're really still a lease up. Their first full semester at from the colleges is fall of 2025 is what they're
What does
expecting.
that mean, status lease up?
So it's they finished the project, or they're almost finished with the project, and they're beginning to accept tenants to move in. So it may be 20% occupied today or 10%. And presumably, because this is a student housing property, it won't be until fall of this year before they receive any sort of real occupancy. And so then also downtown, we have the in-town lofts. This is not what it looks like now. This is a rendering. This is the Jim Kimmel building. So if any of you passed by that recently, you would not spend the night at it. It does not look like that. But it will at some point. We've been talking to some appraisers that were inquiring about values and the downtown redevelopment, and it appears that they're going through some financing right now and applying for some tax credits, historical tax credit programs, and will likely get off the ground soon, which we're excited about. Continuing this push for downtown redevelopment. But that's really kind of a highlight reel of some of the apartments being built, and we'll move on to BTR, build to rent. This is sort of new. This is new for us as well. It's been around for the last 5 or 10 years, but it really hasn't been pitched as this prominent investment platform until the last really year or two. And so what it is it's essentially communities. Peyton's Park is probably the best example of a BTR community in Lubbock on how they're built across the country, where it's a neighborhood of these single family, very traditional 3-2, 2-car garage homes, and the entire community is rentals. There is, or for sale as an investment sale. It's not for sale for home buyers. And so all of these are rented as houses, and so it's hard to track. There's not one consistent data source for build-to-rent communities, mostly because when the permits are pulled, they're pulled as single-family houses. They're not pulled as multifamily. They're not built as traditional multifamily communities, even though they are, like in real life if you drive by them. And so that's part of it, is we're discovering new ones when you drive by and say, that one there, and it is, and it's a build-to-rent community. Beatonbo's carved off, I know some of y'all know, carved off some of their townhome packages and things like that in their neighborhoods. This one's at Del Farms, 62 units. But this is becoming more and more popular, and it's really good to know for your clients and for you guys, because it's what's ultimately starting to compete at a high level with apartment complexes, especially in major metros like a DFW, New York, Chicago, LA, Phoenix, all of the kind of prime metros across the United States. These are really taken off because during COVID, everybody's working from home. Nobody's working in the city anymore, and there was less residential suburban apartments being built. And a lot of people over the last several years haven't necessarily returned to work on a full-time schedule in their cities. And so they were accustomed to and wanted to live in the suburban environment, maybe a hybrid work model. You're in the office downtown 3 days a week or twice a week, or you're fully remote. And as we just talked about, it's significantly still more affordable to rent than it is to own. This gives you the best of both worlds. So you may rent this house, you've got no obligations for your yard, your maintenance, your home at all. It's almost like, how you think of like a condo, but a house. And so that's becoming really, really popular across the United States. And so we're still learning about this as well. We're digging into it, but it's certainly over the next several years will have a huge effect on the rental market in every market in the country. And with that, that's it. We're going to get to some Q&A, but then we're going to leave this up. This is a QR code to this presentation, as well as if you go to our website, you can find any of our presentations from years past, and take a look at those, download the books. We put out a book every year. Lisa does a great job assembling all this information, all the data points, and we mail it out to our clients and customers, but you feel free to have access as well.
All right.